Until we are happy with our own company, it is very hard to be in relationship with someone else. I knew that the next partner needed to be better than the peace and solitude that I had found by being single and living alone. Because how are you possibly going to draw what you truly desire towards you if you're not even acting like yourself? So I'm messaging my sister and being like, oh my God, remember that Jack Astor's guy? Well, get this. This guy wants to take me to Booster Juice on a first date. And so we started calling him BJ. This man does not need me. He does not need me to be his therapist. He does not need me to be his mother. He does not need me to be his perfect housewife. Now, as I promised, I am going to read to you the letter that I wrote to my future husband, which is now just a letter about Lee. Okay, you little wild ones, welcome back. This is Too Much, Not Enough, the podcast where we stop shrinking, start trusting, and reclaim every messy, magical part of who we are. Because I have learned from experience that is the true path to the freedom and joy that we seek. Now, today's episode is a part 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1, I would highly recommend it. That is last week's episode where I talk about how I got caught in the cycle of shrinking and self-abandoning for men, and then how I broke that cycle and called in my absolute dream partner who I'm obsessed with. And that is what I'm going to be talking about on today's episode. And if you don't want to go back, you absolutely do not need to. You will still be able to follow along very clearly in this episode. But for those of us who, like me, love the full story, all the context, and all the gory details, then I do recommend listening to that part 1, especially if you're someone who has found that they are often shrinking and making themselves smaller in order to be loved and to be chosen and accepted. Then that episode talks a lot about how that came to be and the things that I was doing to continue fulfilling that story, that cycle, that outcome, and how that meant that I was continuing to attract, in my case, the men, the partners who kept that story alive. And so I'm very excited because I get to chat about the love of my life today, which I will talk about him anytime, anywhere. His name is Lee, and we met on Bumble. And one of the things I mentioned at the end of last episode is that I had very much come to a point in my life where I knew that the next partner who I invested my time with needed to be better than the peace and solitude that I had found by being single and living alone. I had come to absolutely adore my alone time. I loved retreating to my apartment that I had decorated exactly for myself. I had never lived in places before where I had been able to decorate something other than my bedroom exactly in my style, how I wanted, and created this like place that I could retreat from the world and be alone and recharge before I went out to the onslaught of stimulation that is out there. And so I was loving living alone. I was enjoying, generally being single. I think there was that natural fear of like, am I going to find someone? Am I meant to be someone who is going to find a partner? Am I meant to have children? Because at the time, like growing up, I had always wanted children. I had been the little girl who did not dream of her wedding, but instead dreamt of her family, who dreamt of her long-term partner who she would experience life with and build a family with and have babies with. I am very close with my family. I love them dearly. They are so important to me. And I knew growing up that I wanted that too. But there was a portion of time there where I lost that desire. And I think first and foremost, because I kept finding myself in relationships with men who I didn't feel like would be an equal partner in raising kids. I was realizing that I would end up doing a lot of the emotional labor. And so I kind of got to the point where I was like, I know myself that I could do it alone. I don't want to, and I don't want to struggle in that way, which I think is more and more common theme amongst my generation and people making the decision to have or not have children is like life can feel like quite an intense struggle and like why add to that. So it's very much in that mindset essentially. And so I was enjoying my single life and realizing that the thing that I had initially feared the most, which was being alone, not finding a long-term partner, not having a family, I was coming to terms with the fact that like while I would miss out on a lot, I could live a pretty fucking awesome life alone. And I think that that is such a huge key component to calling in a really truly aligned partner. Because until we are happy with our own company, are happy with ourselves, it is very hard to be in relationship with someone else. And that's for a myriad of reasons. I'm sure you've probably heard this a million times, but when you love yourself first, the love you are able to find with others is so much deeper. And it's so interesting because I, so many times in my life, have realized that like these things that you hear over and over again, likely because they are really the true keys to life, sometimes don't land until you're in a specific moment, hearing it from a specific person at a specific time in your life. And this happened for me. I was doing a coaching program with Ruthie Lindsay, and she said to me, I said I was just really struggling at the time with like loving my friends and like accepting my friends and, giving to them in the generous way that I knew I wanted to. I was feeling so resistant to that. And she said to me at the time, well, that makes sense because we can only love others to the extent that we love ourselves. Because if we don't love ourselves, I realized, then we're just forcing that love we're trying to give out. And while I'd heard a version of what she had said to me so many times, it landed in me in a way it had never before. And then this just continued to become clearer and clearer and clearer as I went on this journey of self acceptance first, because at least for me personally, I realized I could not jump from this place of shame and self-loathing that I had been in for a long time to just absolute self-love. That was too wide of a gap. So I broke it down a little bit. And first, it was sort of self awareness, being aware of the patterns and the behaviors that I was engaging in, and then accepting that I was in those patterns and behaviors and emotional sort of loops because at some point I had been able to protect myself through that and to kind of get rid of that frustration with myself because at one point this was supportive, but then has now become an unsupportive pattern. And, then from there, bringing in that compassion of like, you're human. Of course, you got into this loop. Of course, you adopted this behavior to feel accepted or loved or whatever. And then from there, was when I was able to move into more self-love. It was not just like a jump from one to the other. It was very much a process. But through those things, I came to understand the more I loved myself, the less shame I felt about the things that I thought were horrible and dark and undesirable about me, the more I was able to absolutely lead from this like generous, open heart space when all the interactions of those around me. And I now realize that one of the key sort of indicators to me where I'm perhaps shutting down a bit, I'm going a little bit off course, I'm not in my like light and my gifts, I'm more maybe in the shadowy side of me, is when I start getting really resentful or resistant to like showing up in my interactions with others with just like love and openness. Once that Once that sort of starts shutting down, that's very much a red flag that's like, okay, something's gone off course here. You are maybe being a little bit hard on yourself, putting too much pressure on yourself. And that sort of self hatred, self loathing is now becoming resistance, impatience for those around you. But, anyways, not shockingly, went on a bit of a tangent there. Let's get back to the story we all came here for, which is how I met and fell in love with Lee. So, a couple things that I remember, and the timeline might be a little bit off, but that I remember doing sort of right before connecting with Lee on Bumble was A, I changed my profile. Essentially, I changed it to just be more like representative of who I was. Instead of, again, packaging myself up in a way that was like desirable or I thought was desirable to men, or to be honest, people at this point, because I was dating men and women, I just started being more honest about who I was. And this may not land for you because, to be honest, back then it may not have landed for me either. But make your profile so open, honest, and such a true reflection of who you are or who you are aspiring to be if you're in a season of change, because that is going to ultimately attract who you really want. Yes, it may take a little longer because you may turn off a bunch of people in the meantime, but those people aren't your people anyways. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. But back then, I was doing what felt like at the time the truest version of a dating profile that I could do. And, I put up some pictures of myself that weren't super like curated with the best light, with the best angle, but that like showed me, like one of them was a picture of me. I was on safari in Rwanda and we went on this like sunset cruise and the boat is pulling up to shore and this absolutely massive elephant is just literally like walking out. And I am like, oh my God, like just pure joy and excitement is on my face. But like my hair looks like crap. I'm not sitting in a pose that did huge favors for my body. I have no makeup on. I didn't look how I thought I should present myself to future suitors, but it was a representation of like the zest and joy that I have for life and my absolute awe of being alive. And I was like, so I should put this up there. So I put like a little bit more of a wider selection of photos of me. And I was just like a little bit more honest in my profile. I talked about the fact that I was both basic and witchy because I am spiritual and connected to other dimensions, but also can be a pretty basic white girl. I talked about the fact that I have thick thighs and a juicy ass, something that I previously was very self-conscious about. And first of all, the minute I got more honest in my profile, I all of a sudden started getting like way more connections and conversations, which again, not surprising, but back then was fearful of showing my full self to someone before I had the chance to sort of get in front of them and, exchange energy. I didn't want people to be turned off before that. Now it makes total sense. Be so freaking honest because someone is going to read that and be like, this is my dream girl. And the other thing I did, which is something that I've been thinking about doing for a long time, but it kind of put off, was I wrote a letter to my future husband. And I will read that letter out to you a little bit later in this episode, because what is so wild is that, so I wrote that letter probably a few months before Leah and I met. And then fast forward a year and a bit, Leah and I had started living together. And I pulled out my little journal that I had written it in and I read it out to Lee. And I was like, this could literally have been like I wrote it about him yesterday. The fact that I wrote it about him months before I met him is wild. And I will read it out to you in just a bit. But first, I'm going to tell you about how Lee and I connected and our first few dates. So connected with Lee, thought his, couple of his photos were super cute. And I said hi to him. But I will say at the time, I had gone through a few situationships that had not panned out to anything. And so I was taking a little bit more of a casual approach. I think I was really busy at the time. And so I said hi, he said hi. And then like a week and a bit went by and I didn't say anything. And then I went back on and realized that I had left a couple of these conversations unanswered. So went back into my conversation with Liam, was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. Sometimes I ignore this app because I like to pretend it doesn't exist because it's too much work," or something like that. And he said, "No problem. This can be super easy. We can do sweats and smoothies or something like that for our first date." And I was like, "Okay, okay, I see you." I will say the conversation was definitely good, but it wasn't like I'd had some other conversations where it was like on fire and the banter back and forth was amazing. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is so good. I never want it to end." It was good, but I wasn't, like, unbelievable. And then I was like, "Well, he hasn't asked me out. Was this gonna go anywhere? We've been talking for a little bit, blah, blah, blah." And then eventually I kind of allude to that, and he's like, "I did ask you out already at the beginning of this conversation." I was like, "That doesn't count." He's like, "Yeah, remember I said, like, we could do sweats or smoothies?" I was like, "That doesn't count. Like, ask me again." So he said, "Okay, Anna, would you like to go out and grab a smoothie sometime?" So we went out. Well, first we were trying to figure out where to go. And this is hilarious because he suggested we go to Booster Juice. Now, I don't want to offend anyone here who likes Booster Juice, but I was like, "Sorry, you're gonna take me on a first date to Booster Juice? Like, what?" And I remember messaging my sister and being like, because a while back, a guy had asked me out and he wanted to take me to Jack Astor's. Again, nothing against Jack Astor's. I love their like deep pan garlic cheesy bread. It is divine. But I have an expectation that if you want to take me out, it's going to be somewhere a little bit more high end. That is just what I expect. It does not need to be crazy fancy. It could be a hole in the wall, but like this cool hole in the wall, good vibe. I'm a foodie. I like good food. I'm just, especially at this age, was quite aware that like if you're going to take me to Jack Astor's on a first date, we're probably not a match. And that is okay. You can love Jack Astor's and I cannot. And let's just not go there. But like, don't take me to Jack Astor's on a first date. Don't take me to Booster Juice on a first date. So I'm messaging my sister and being like, "Oh my God, remember that Jack Astor's guy? Well, get this. This guy wants to take me to Booster Juice on a first date." And so we started calling him BJ, which Lee loves that nickname. And so we went on our first date wearing sweatsuit to Impact Kitchen and had smoothies, and it was amazing. A very lovely first date, but I certainly didn't come out of it thinking like, "Oh my God, I've met my person. This guy's amazing. Like, I can't wait to see him again." It was just sort of like, that was cool, and I would definitely be interested in going on a second date. And I will say on that first date, like we talked about real shit, it felt like, which I was so grateful for. We're both older. I was like, I think I was 34 at the time. He was in his 40s. I mean, he still is in his 40s, but he was in his like kind of early 40s. He's 8 years older than me. And we've both been in long term relationships. We were both looking for our long term person. And so we got kind of right down to it and asked questions like, "What is most important for you in a relationship?" And for me, at the time and still, it was safety. I need to feel safe with the other person because I had just been in a long-term relationship where I did not feel safe. My nervous system did not feel safe with that person, and therefore it took a major toll on my body, on my nervous system, on my mind, on my whole being. And so safety, number one priority for me in any relationship that I'm pursuing now. And for him, he said a teammate. He wants a teammate to do life with, which I love, because we are 100% teammates now. And so, yeah, so we had that first date. He walked me home. He gave me a kiss and kind of, went on his way. And then didn't message me the next day, and I was going absolutely crazy because I have absolutely no patience, and I was like, "Why is this guy not messaging me? Like, what the fuck?" And so I messaged him and was just like, "I had such a nice time yesterday. Thanks so much, blah, blah, blah." And then that kicked up the conversation again. It was my birthday that weekend, so I had plans all week. We had met on a Tuesday. I had plans all weekend, and he was like, maybe I can take you out next week for your birthday, which was really sweet. And then I might be messing up the timeline a little bit here, but I remember he called me that week to tell me about how he had gotten a free donut at this pizza place that he went to, and told me this like whole story about how he got it. And I remember I was working on something at the time. I was like very hyper focused on something. So I was a little bit half listening. At the time, I was like, oh, he's telling me about a free donut. That's a bit weird. But looking back, I was like, oh no, he wanted a reason to talk to me. And like, that was, his kind of in to be like, I want to tell you this story about this free donut I got, which is very sweet. That Sunday, he was driving back from his dad's place and he messaged me. He's like, hey, I'm just like driving back to my place. I'd love to just like swing by and see you for a second if you're free. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, definitely. I was like, well, do you want to like come up and hang out? I just thought it was like so sweet. And it was very much this thing that I have learned in all my relationships that have ever gone somewhere is like, he will make the effort. The other person will make the effort if they want to see you. It won't be hard. You won't be left thinking, does he want to? Does he not? Like, of course, there's some of that as you move into a relationship, but overall, it's clear that that person is interested in you. And those are the relationships that I have always found have gone somewhere. And it was very clear that he was interested in me, and I was interested in him as well. I liked hanging out with him. It was just like fun. It was so much fun hanging out. And most importantly, I felt safe around him. And when I say I felt safe around him, I don't just mean in like the face value way that we think of safety, like he didn't make me feel uncomfortable. My body felt relaxed and safe around him. And that was so important for me being able to feel like I could be myself. And having never, not once, brought my entire self to a relationship previously, I had not understood the value of this. Because in my year and a half, maybe a little bit more, of being with Lee, I have been able to become the weirdest, most wonderful and joyful version of myself. And I don't think I had been conscious to the fact that in previous relationships, by kind of hiding certain parts of me at the beginning, it meant that I just continued hiding those things because I hid them at the beginning because I wanted them to like me and I didn't want them to reject those parts of me. But then once they started liking me, I had this subconscious understanding that I couldn't then bring those parts out because then they might reject me. And so I would keep those parts hidden. And it wasn't even necessarily a super conscious and like active decision that I was like, I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to be like this. But I do remember feeling like I wish I could be like weirder and sillier in my relationships. Like I'd really love to be like so weird and silly with my partner. And there were like bits of that with previous partners, but with Lee, I am like so weird and so silly. And not only is he cool with it, but he actually deeply enjoys it. Like I'll be sitting at my computer doing something and I'm like singing to myself, stimming, or I'm doing a weird dance or like something that like isn't considered attractive in my underwear, like thrusting with like a face on. And he will laugh and I can see he's getting true delight out of that version of me, out of that side of me. And that has just then reinforced like that I get to be me, fully me in the relationship. And that has come from the feeling of safety, of being accepted and loved for who I am. That was such a shift from previous relationships. And I remember talking to a friend about this. We had both been in long-term relationships. She'd been in with her partner for about 10 years. I had been with my previous partner for about 7 years. We both broke up around the same time and sort of for similar reasons. Obviously different stories, but for sort of for similar reasons. And we had both become the full emotional support therapist, like go-to person in each of our relationships, and our partners had refused to go like seek outside of therapy. And we were talking about this fact that like we actually don't know what it's like to just be wanted and needed in a relationship for simply being us, being a human, being Hannah, being her. We only knew how to be in relationship when we were giving something, providing a service, fulfilling a need. And so we had this sort of realization that we were now going to have to learn how to be okay with the fact that our worth in this relationship was simply by existing and not by performing or providing a service or doing a thing, carrying out a need or whatever it was, which felt very strange and uncomfortable at the time. And now my heart breaks thinking that our worth in a relationship was anything other than just us, who we were as human beings. And that, yes, when you are building a partnership with someone, of course you are going to do things for them. Of course you're going to fulfill certain needs for them and be in service of them. But that is not the prerequisite for being loved in a relationship. That to be loved for just who you are was something foreign to us. And basically, in developing a relationship with Lee, I came to learn what that meant in reality, in action, that I could show up just as me and that he did not need me, but he wanted me. And that was such a huge departure from previous people I had dated. Like, they needed me to fulfill the thing that I fulfilled at the beginning to try and get them to like me. And so then I had to keep fulfilling that thing. Whereas I looked at Lee and was like, this man does not need me. He does not need me to be his therapist. He does not need me to be his mother. He does not need me to be his, perfect housewife. He wants me in his life. He wants me to be his teammate and to build life together and go through life together. And that was such a huge distinction that then allowed me to continue to show up as who I was and not think that I needed to like contort myself into the version of what he needed. And it felt so fucking good to be in a relationship with a man who simply wanted me and also allowed me to kind of take my foot off the gas because I would show up and he was taking care of shit. He was organizing the dates. I didn't have to ask him to do that. He was like, hey, I booked this for Saturday. We're going out. Or like, hey, we're doing XYZ. He is like the one who's like so on top of like getting birthday gifts for people and like does the grocery shopping and just all this shit that I was like, oh my God, wait, this could be the relationship where like, especially because of my ADHD, things like remembering birthdays, buying cards, grocery shopping, those kind of things are super taxing for me. Like they take so much extra work. And I was like, wait, it's acceptable for me to be like, no, I don't want to cook dinner every night. And for someone to still love me? What? Simply because I bring them joy by being present? This is revolutionary. And so the more we spent time together, the more I realized like, not only do I not have to shrink to be loved and accepted by this man, he actually wants me to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And he loves a lot of that. Within the 6-month window before we started dating, I found out I had ADHD. And again, I very consciously came into the relationship and was like, I want to be very open and honest about my ADHD. And so I was very honest with him. And bless Lee, he is a very curious human being. And so he meets a lot of things with curiosity. And he'd be like, okay, I see you've done this, like left this thing out on the side. Why have you done that? I'd like to learn. And so we kind of learned together, but part of that meant that I wasn't trying to hide that sometimes I forget to do shit and that kind of sucks. Like I was able to be honest about the fact that cooking dinner every night for me is really difficult and really taxing. If you want me to vacuum on a regular basis, I need to be able to see the vacuum. It cannot be tucked away in a closet. It has to be out and easily accessible for me to be like, I'm thinking of vacuuming. I see the vacuum. Let me get it. Let me vacuum. Versus I'm thinking of vacuuming. Okay, I need to go downstairs and get it from the closet, but I'm just going to do this thing first. And then 3 weeks goes by and I'm like, shit, I was going to vacuum. So I was able to be so honest about all of these things that it meant that they weren't like I wasn't trying to sweep it under the rug and then it built up all this resentment. Don't get me wrong, Lee and I absolutely fight and we absolutely have conflict, but from coming into the relationship and being our full selves at the beginning, and more importantly than that, each of us accepting that version of each other. Because I remember when I started dating my ex, we both from the beginning knew that there were things about each other that we did not like or did not jive. And because we were young and inexperienced in love, we were like, well, we can change those things. Those things will change and then it will get better. And so we kind of came into the relationship with this mentality of wanting to change the other person. And I actively came into my relationship with Lee being like, I have to have my eyes wide open to every aspect of this human being and realize that if he does not change one iota from now until the end of, our relationship, I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with him not changing and accept and love all of the parts of him and not just love the parts I liked and then, attempted behind the scenes to change the parts I didn't. And I think that's another huge aspect of why things have been such a friggin' dream is because we're like, no, I accepted that you are like this from the beginning. And that doesn't mean that we don't respectfully communicate to each other and point out the things that we need changed and work on that for each other. But it's just understanding that, like, I am not expecting you to be a totally different human being in order for me to be happy and vice versa. And so, one of the biggest reasons that my current relationship is actually better than all of the things I had ever hoped I could have in my like lifetime partner. Part of that is because we both showed up as ourselves and accepted that. And also because we've both done work before coming into this relationship and are very aware of our own shit in the way that we can not get super shut down when the other person points out, like, hey, that thing you're doing is not cool. And previously, because I was like hiding all of this stuff about myself and keeping it so close to my chest and so ashamed of the like real parts of me that I thought weren't desirable, anytime someone pointed that out, like a partner was like, why are you doing that? That kind of sucks. I'd be like so defensive. Whereas now, because I've been like, hey, just FYI, I'm pretty fucking cool, but there are these things I do over here that aren't always so fun, but that's okay because I'm human and I can't always be really fucking cool. That when Lee comes to me and is like, I don't love that thing you're doing, I can be like, yeah, I could see why you don't, versus being like, fuck you, I don't do that, how dare you? And like that has made such a big difference. Like going back to that self love, self acceptance. When you accept those parts of you that feel more shameful and messy and gross and ugh, you are then able to bring them to light and realize they're actually not as bad as we've all made them out to be. And from there, you're able to maybe poke a little bit of fun at them. Like Lee said from very early on, one of the things he really likes about me is my ability to call myself on my own shit. That he'll be like, hey, stop doing that. And I'll be like, yeah, that's probably pretty fucking annoying, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to try to stop doing that. He never said it was like, what he loved about me was that like I wasn't messy or that I didn't have parts of me that kind of are annoying. He said, I love that you can recognize that you have those parts because we all have those parts. And so this has been the journey of me going from being in relationship after relationship and situationship after situationship with men who I shrank and contorted myself into being what I thought they needed in order to be loved and accepted by them, into being the biggest, boldest version of myself so far and realizing that has actually led to the thing I was trying to get before by making myself small and shrinking and gift wrapping my power for other people. I actually got it by doing the opposite of that. I got the authentic, real, deep, deep, magical dream love. Like Leah's the love of my life. I understood the concept before of wanting to build a family with someone else. I had never embodied the feeling of wanting to build a family, a life, a future with someone else, of wanting to spend even the most miserable of days with that other person. I did not know what it felt like to feel that until I met Lee. And that is all to say, if you are finding yourself in patterns with partners in romantic relationships or even with friends or at work, and you have this gnawing in your gut that there is something more aligned out there for you, that there is something that is going to set your soul on fire, and you are willing to do the work that is required to get that thing, I am living proof that not only does it exist, but it's actually going to exceed your expectations. And that it may require a few go arounds of that same cycle that you've been stuck in as you build awareness and you start to make different decisions to finally break free and call in the job of your dreams, the partner of your dreams, the friend of your dreams, or to call in a different version of what you are already in. Because it's not always about completely, shutting down what you're in and going for something entirely new. This is possible too in your current relationship, in your current job. It's about seeing things differently, doing things differently, and at the end of the day, in my experience showing up more authentically so that you draw what you are desiring towards you. Because how are you possibly going to draw what you truly desire towards you if you're not even acting like yourself? Because likely, especially when it comes to partnership, the thing that you desire is the thing that the other person desires too. And in order to create that matching, you both need to show up fully as yourselves to be magnetized towards each other. Now, as I promised, I am going to read to you the letter that I wrote to my future husband, which is now just a letter about Lee. Okay. Here it is. My partner. I know you're out there with your strong hands, beautiful eyes, and kind smile. I love how easy it feels to be in this partnership. The knowing feeling of peace in my body. I have never felt so emotionally safe. The way you've understood and supported my needs from the beginning. Literally, check, check, check. Lee did all of those things and continues to. Neither of us have tried to change the other. We came together with acceptance and love. You allow me to go deep. In fact, you welcome it. You celebrate my need for rest and sleep. Lee and I have the best midday naps together. Honestly, they're amazing. And you call me out when my superwoman complex kicks in and gently nudge me to slow down and reprioritize. This actually just literally happened the other day, too. I love that we're just as content exploring and adventuring to small towns all over the world as we are giggling in bed at night. I feel like my best, weird, quirky, life loving self around you. I can talk to you about anything, and same goes for you. I understand partnership on a level I haven't before. You shifted my perspective. You are so kind without expectation. I love to watch how others light up around you. You show up for the world. You are so passionate about what you do, really see people, and you express yourself beautifully through what you wear. I love being silly and serious with you. I deeply appreciate how connected you are to growth. I never knew I would find someone who wanted to truly understand all of my layers. You are such a gift. I always dreamed a connection like this existed for me, but never knew it would become a reality. Two beautiful, connected people coming together to amplify their lives, dance all the time, live joy, laughter, belonging, light. You are my mirror in all the right and necessary ways. You have the same thirst for life. We hold each other with a gentleness that supports our individual evolution in a way we couldn't do alone. Our intimate relationship is one I've always hoped for. Ours exploring each other's naked bodies, giving and receiving pleasure with so much genuine desire. You are intelligent, kind, loving, brave, funny. You have such integrity. I'm so grateful for the feeling of safety I have around you. Your creativity inspires me. It really does. He has written and published a children's book. He has written several like TV pilots and things like that. Like he is such a creative person. Your cooking makes me so happy. It does because he does it pretty much every night. Your weird sense of humor is my favorite. We have worked so hard to see and support each other in the ways the other needs. I love how important friends and family are to both of us and how we nurture those relationships together. That has been a huge theme of our relationship, like making sure that we see family and friends regularly, that we see each other's family and friends regularly, which was something that was deeply missing from previous relationships of mine. We've both experienced pain in our past, but used that to grow into more conscious and loving people. Our energy feels made for each other, and I feel like I can take on the things I've always wanted to with less fear than before, which is so true. Like the things that I have stepped into in the like year and a half since being with him are like these massive leaps that I've been wanting to do forever and have been too fearful to, because he basically just like created this soft place for me to land that I know I can always come back to if something doesn't work out. Like I just know that at the end of the day, I have actually already achieved my greatest dream, which is finding him. And so everything else now is like the cherry on top. And that feels really fucking awesome. Okay. And finally, I say, I always knew you would be, but you were so worth the wait. And I truly believe that. Like, I would have waited another decade or more for him. I mean, I'm so glad I didn't have to because I want to spend every freaking millisecond I have left in this life with him, but I would have waited even longer. So, yeah, thanks for coming along for the ride as I talked about how I broke the cycle of shrinking and making myself smaller in the name of being loved to becoming the biggest, loudest, boldest version of me. And from there, entering an era of feeling more loved, desired, wanted, chosen than ever before. So I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day today, the rest of your week. If you have a moment, I'd be so unbelievably grateful if you could follow and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. It makes such a huge difference and it only takes a moment and it's free. And yeah, until next time, you absolute wild ones. See you soon.